Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us, a program based on the premise that life in general goes better if it's all of us pulling one direction as opposed to you, me, and them pulling different directions. Hello It's Us is brought to you through a collaboration between Uptown Bills and the Extended Dream Foundation and all the folks here at Public Access Television Channel 18. We're happy tonight to have some friends from the university as our guest, and as always, Keith Ruff, my co-host down in the end. But from my right, we have a spasm. We have Tiffany Stevenson Earl, Mark Harris, and Jan Gorman. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
It's good to be here.
we'll kind of let you introduce yourselves and explain a little of what you do, and then we'll talk about.
Right. Tiffany, as you mentioned, Tiffany Stevenson Earl from the University of Iowa's Office of Equal Opportunity and Diversity within the Chief Diversity Office. In that office, I work in the Complaint Investigations Unit. My working title is Compliance Specialist and ADA Coordinator. So my main responsibility as a compliance specialist is to investigate complaints at the university that includes any form of discrimination, harassment, violence, etc. As the university's ADA coordinator, my responsibility is to ensure that the university is in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Again, I'm Mark Harris. I'm Director of Student Disability Services at the University of Iowa. Our office provides academic accommodations for students who might need an accommodation based on their disability to have access to classroom materials. And that might include something as longer time for exams if it takes somebody longer to process information, sign language interpreters for the deaf and hard of hearing, textbooks in alternative format.
And I'm Jan Gorman, and I work in the Faculty and Staff Disability Services Office at the University of Iowa, and I'm the director of that particular program. We work with applicants and employees, all employees, students, staff, faculty, who have health conditions or are believed to have health conditions, and assisting and advising them in matters of accommodation, options in regards to employment. We also look at once people are in a position as to what their needs are and how best to help maintain opportunities for successful employment. We do a lot of education on campus related to employment, and actually serve as kind of a conduit between employees, applicants, and departments, and in all matters related to health and employment.
And it's really a nice coincidence that we have you guys here this week, as on Saturday, July 26th, we prepare to celebrate the 24th anniversary of the ADA, which obviously has changed lots of things on all college campuses, as well as virtually every other part of life in the United States. How did the impact when the ADA first go into effect, how long did it take to shake out all the details for universities? I don't know how many of you guys were involved in that when it happened, but.
You're all looking at me. Okay. Well, so just to back up a little bit and why they're looking at me. So the university created the original position that I held when I came to the university in 1993. The position was created in response to the passage of the ADA and the university's interest in trying to assist people with disabilities, applicants and faculty and staff, but also to assist departments in looking at how best to provide accommodations. What does that process look like? How do we help people? And since it's grown, but Terry, I think was your question more to like all universities, which I can't speak to.
No,
Okay.
we'll speak to the
You'll
University
speak
of
to
Iowa.
one. So from just my perception is that originally people just didn't have a clue. I mean, folks just didn't know what to do. Should they be upset about it? Should they be scared of it? Should they, what are they supposed to do? And for the most part, I found in working with employers is that they were hesitant because it was a law, and it put a little bit of a concern on the employer's perspective of, well, what if I do something wrong, or what if I, and how do I do this? And I don't want to do anything wrong. And so in some ways it put up a little bit of a barricade, a partition between employers and employees. But as soon as we began to help people understand that they didn't need to be concerned about the angst, that they were having, we've seen a much more welcoming and environment, and we strive for that, and to be more supportive to individuals with disabilities. And so I've been there since '93, quite a change, and a positive change in a lot of different ways.
Since the passage of ADA, has there been an influx of students with disabilities? And if there is, how has it been dealt with?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. It's a little bit different in our realm because students were initially covered under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Okay. And I came into my position in 2008. But as best as our records indicate, then my office was created in either 74 or 75 as a response to the Rehabilitation Act. And so the ADA didn't change a whole lot of things because what we were required to give to students in terms of accommodations was already covered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the rumors just were so horrid when the act was first passed. My God, it had people scared to death that, you're going to have to tear all your buildings down and rebuild them and all this. And, the law obviously never said that. It said, if you make major renovations or have new construction, you make that accessible. And then the definitions of what were accessible and what weren't. And for those of us who dealt with things before the ADA, I mean, I went to college 20 years before the ADA was passed. So trying to convince the school to do something with accessibility when there was no definition,
Right.
was kind of interesting. And those were back in the days where if a business wanted to make itself accessible and it had one step to get in, okay, well, go get a little load of concrete or a load of asphalt, and if the space from your building to the sidewalk was this long, that's how you pour it in there. Don't worry about the fact that you had about a 60-degree ramp, but people were trying. So, that was one of the good things about the ADA is at least it gave some minimum guidelines that people had to work with.
And I would,
go ahead.
I would add, it's a learning process. It's nothing written in black and white that tells you exactly what you have to do. I think everything is evolving, and I think the way we do things at the university, it's more of the, if you don't know how to do it, then you ask the next person, how should we be doing it? So I think it's more of a learning process in terms of how we accommodate and how we make sure that our campus is accessible.
And I was just going to chime in on that. I think a few people are aware that we're one of the only universities that I know of that has a full-time ADA person in facilities management. And so there is someone that we work with closely whose only job is accessibility of the physical structures here on campus.
That's a very good point. And actually, the unit that I work with, Faculty and Staff Faculty and Staff Disability Services, is also one of the very few within a university structure. Typically, this role does not exist. And so I think that that's really exciting. It says something about the university that even a lot of the Big Ten schools don't have this. And as I've been talking and working with, because we try to create collaborative efforts and just learn from one another. And there aren't that many folks out there that actually do this. I think that the university should be commended for that. But there's always ways to improve. It is a learning. It is truly a learning. Okay? And access, the definition of access, what Tiffany was talking about, it changes, with ADEG changes. And so you might have a bathroom 10 years ago that was accessible, and now it's still considered accessible, but it's not it's not the ideal. So it's learning, and that I think is a struggle sometimes because that bathroom exists. Well, do you go in then and rip it out? Well, no, you don't. But if somebody has a need to use it, well, now we look at it a little differently.
Yeah. And you're right, because even in bathrooms and that, the fixtures and tubs and sinks and all that stuff is constantly changing. So that, and because none of ADA is a one size fits all. That's one kind of problem for it, is that folks who use wheelchairs and folks who have a mobility issue but use crutches or a walker encounter very different problems, and will use bathing, for example. I'm not going to get in the tub. I may never get out of the tub again. But somebody else can just step over. Even a very small lip on a shower creates problems for me. Whereas if it's a nice, even roll-in one, that works for me and doesn't cause problems for somebody else. Or the different kind of knobs on a faucet or whatever. There are some that allow everybody to use it, and there are some that help some, but complicate for others. And I think those are the compromises we look for. And as long as things keep changing, what's good?
Been a big help in the concept of universal design.
Yes. It would, and that's, you had mentioned, Mark, about the person who's responsible for accessibility out of one of the departments, facilities management at the university. He's very proactive in regards to universal design and has brought a lot of the concepts forward. And it would be, I think it would be very helpful to the university as we continue to learn that this is probably the best route to go, don't you think?
Yes. Right, for instance, lately, all the steps on the walk in the Pentagon have been eliminated.
Yes.
Yeah. The one other thing that I think is unique to the University of Iowa that I don't know if you folks might be aware of is we have a program that's jointly sponsored by Facilities Management in our office at Student Disability Services called Hawkeye Accessibility Ambassadors. And that is a group that's trained in a group of students who volunteer. They're trained in universal design and accessibility of physical structures. And then whenever there's a major new build or renovation project, they're brought into the process at the planning stage to look for things that the architects might have overlooked. And so we get end user buy-in from the very beginning of any kind of expenditure like that. And I don't think anybody else is doing that.
That's so critical, because architects know accessible design, but accessible design isn't always pretty. And architects like pretty things. I have a friend who works for Opportunity Village in Clear Lake who called me 4 or 5 weeks ago to say they had just opened a new house and had the open house for it and went through it. And he said, I wish you'd have been here because you wouldn't have been happy. Because there were, in large part, it was okay, but there was lots of little things that he's right would have driven me crazy. One of the things being in the shower, beautiful roll-in shower with a bench seat on one wall, and the shower head 4 feet away on the other wall. The sidewalk coming out of the house curved and tilted for drainage. Well, he and I have known each other for a long time and have gone down sidewalks like that. Frequently with him riding on the back of the chair as we did the curves, but he had seen me go down enough of them to know bad things could happen there.
Sure.
And it curved right into the driveway and then down the cul-de-sac. He said, no.
Yeah.
Or, windows that were just a little too high to reach things. And he said for other homes that they had built, the previous person who ran it had a group of folks with disabilities that whenever they started or were going to plan something, he called them in.
Yeah.
The new person didn't. Decided that they knew everything that needed to be done. And so rather than involve somebody who uses that kind of stuff on an everyday basis and knows why, 1 more inch up or a half an inch down is a better way to do something.
That's why I've enjoyed being on campus, because I've been asked several times to look over something or try it out before they make it permanent.
Yeah, no, I think that's terrific that they have that.
Yeah, and I think our philosophy at the university is that those kind of guidelines are the floor. They just, minimal compliance is not what we shoot for. Here we shoot for usability, and one example is we're in preliminary discussions with the College of Pharmacy. If their new building goes ahead, and this is something I think that a lot of us don't think about, but they want to design the structure in such a way that all the elevators, you come in one side, and you exit from the opposite side. So a chair user never has to back up or turn around to get out of an elevator. And I thought that was so thoughtful. But that's something that I'm not sure that if we weren't aware of those issues, that would have been thought of.
And that's one thing that would take time to come around, but it has.
Sometimes it just takes the leadership of a couple people and then being collaborative. And I think that we say that great things that the university is doing, and not to say that we're perfect, and we have an awful lot of growth and development to do yet, but we do work very collaboratively. We are an environment that it's not just one person that moves forward on something. We talk to one another, we learn from one another. There's a group of 5 of us that get together on a regular basis about several times a month to take a look at, well, what's happening on campus, what's the direction that we should be looking at for various things. We talk to folks that are within our own constituents, so to speak, and get input from them and try to bring that forward then. And that's been exciting. So a lot of the changes that we have been able to make have been because of those collaborative efforts, and that is exciting. It's been fun.
And I was just going to add, we always welcome, if there's something that we can be doing better or recommendations, we always welcome those, whether it's contacting my office, Jen's office, or Mark's office, or facilities management. Sorry.
Yeah, and I just wanted to expand on the whole idea that there's a subgroup of us who meet part of a larger committee called the Disability Planning and Action Committee. And I recently got back from a meeting of all the CIC directors for Student Disability Services, and none of them had this parallel on their campus. And that is high-level administrators who have the ability to affect change meet on a quarterly basis. We, 3 of us plus 2 others, drive the agenda, but they meet to say, okay, what do we need to be looking at resource-wise? What are the major initiatives that we need to have in our awareness? And I don't think anybody else is doing that.
Even though ADA is a great concept, we still have to remind those who were born after ADA to keep at it. Because if we don't keep at it, the way politics are lately, we could lose everything we've got.
I think that's true, and I think from also the perspective of individuals who have non-visible disabilities, they continue to struggle in many of the same ways that they have before. And maybe the stigma associated with having any type of disability is less, I hope so. But there's still concerns about disclosure, and I'm not speaking specifically to the university, but just as I know people in the community, and so there's a lot that still needs to be done, and I think your statement is very apropos to what could happen if people are not really staying on top of it and making sure that people who need to know about disability are aware of disability. I started to tell you when I first came to the university, I had a department director come to me, and they were all in a flurry, and this person was in this flurry because they thought now with the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act that that they would just have flocks of people with disabilities lining up at their door for application for jobs, and whenever they would have a vacancy or whatever. And so they just thought, well, this is, and it wasn't a bad thing or a positive thing. It was just more of, how do we handle that? I mean, how do we address that? And so realizing that there's just this lack of awareness that, that folks don't realize that people with disabilities might not still have the same offering of accommodations in regards to academic needs in some institutions, or maybe their disability. We work with a lot of people in the university whose disabilities were never identified until they became an adult. And so they went through their entire academic situation and years of schooling without any support, and they made it. They did okay, for some, but they could have done so much better, And so it's even looking at, well, how do we help those individuals if they feel comfortable in disclosing?
And I think so much of that is having a chance to see other folks with disabilities
Yeah.
who have successfully navigated the system,
Yeah.
and being able to talk to people and give people advice.
Right.
One of the best things about going through rehab after my accident was, back then before managed care, people came back every 6 months for a checkup. So you would have somebody with a brand new disability who could talk to someone who was a year, 2 years, 10 years out,
Right.
and kind of give a warning path of where some of the pitfalls were,
Yeah.
who to ask questions, what answers never to give to questions, and just the general how-to stuff. And I think that's still very important, and it's something Keith and I discuss a lot, and that so much of increasing awareness amongst folks who don't have disabilities is just seeing people with
Yes.
disabilities
Right.
Yeah.
out and
Yeah.
about.
Yes.
And I tell people, there's all kinds of places you can get on a committee. Get on different committees, but stay away from committees specifically related to disabilities. Show you're not a one-trick pony. Go get involved in something else. Participate, and other people on the committee are going to realize, well, actually knows what he's talking about.
Because
Has an interest in something else, and that kind of snowballs, and they're comfortable then talking to you when you're out in public.
Right.
We'll say hello or whatever, and You know, it just takes people being out and using the automatic doors and the ramps and all this stuff that the law has provided so that you don't get the old response, well, why don't you have a ramp here? Well, folks from disabilities don't shop here. We can't get in. Of course we don't.
There is that.
You know, but we have to show that we're embracing what the changes are. We're embracing the opportunities. You know, get out and vote. Know the little things that go with voting. That no, you don't have to go in the voting station to vote. You can request somebody come out to the vehicle and let you vote in your vehicle if it's a major effort to get in.
And by getting involved in other areas, you're avoiding that label. He's disabled.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the biggest way you can do it, by getting involved in other areas other than disability issues.
And it doesn't matter what other area you get involved in.
No.
Disability issues are going to come up.
Sure.
Yeah.
I sat on a Citizens Advisory Committee for Park and Recreation in Marshalltown for a while. Well, we started replacing park equipment, and son of a gun, accessibility comes into that.
Sure.
Yep.
So you
Absolutely.
call the vendor in and say, you know, this is what I want you to make. And by the way, I want it to be accessible. And it's amazing then how a vendor will look at their products and how does the general public use them. And
Well, I think that's part of the business case. There's a strong business case for being disability aware, because then that vendor can go, when there are other cities looking for a similar project, and say, hey, we do everything and it's accessible. What we built will be accessible.
go here, they'll go there
Yep.
and look for an example. Because yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money that gets spent on disability-related issues, and people like to know that, you know, the money they're spending is given a payback, and you know, people aren't avoiding it.
Right.
It's kind of like ramps. If there's a ramp next to a flight of stairs, kind of like in the library, which do you think people use 99% of the time? I have never been next to that ramp or any other ramp when somebody without a disability walks up to it and goes, oh no, I may not use this. This is for disabled persons only. I will go up the steps. No, everybody just assume go up a ramp.
Yeah. Well, if you're a mom with a stroller,
Right.
the ramp is
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
it's a nice surprise. It's not its usual, its original intention, but it, you know, or if you're carrying a bunch of books on a cart.
So it goes to that whole concept of universal design, designing
Exactly.
for all.
Exactly.
So,
Or if you frequent a coffee shop and there's an accessible button right there, it makes it a lot easier
Yeah.
to go in and out and not be at the attention or focus of everyone else.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's still nice to have the stuff. Or nice to have the people
Yeah.
to help.
Yeah.
And you know, that's one thing I have noticed in Iowa City is pretty much wherever you're at and whatever you're doing, whether it's employees or just other customers, everybody's really helpful.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you seldom get people who pretend they don't see you struggling with the door or pretend they don't see something,
Right.
which, you know, early on was a very frequent occurrence.
And the more you frequent the place, the more adjusted they become and more relaxed.
Uh-huh.
I think what I'm hearing you guys say is, and it's a lot of what I talk to university employers about, is developing relationships with people. And, by being out and about and being on committees and being seen, the relationships are formed. And then when relationships are formed, there's more acceptance, forgiving. I mean, everything that we do in any relationship occurs. And so it's great to see more individuals out and about than 20 years ago. I mean, it truly is. Of course, the hills at the University of Iowa, I think, I understand, are quite painful. I don't know any other way to put it. And I don't know how to make them flatter. So.
But yet, they have done their best to make it accessible.
Well, that's good to hear. There's a lot of trying.
Sure. And I tell our prospective students the two things we can't control for you. We can't control the hills. We can't control the weather.
How about 1 out of 2? See, I've got the solution for that. And after last winter, and if this summer keeps going along, I think we could get a bond issue to put a geodesic dome over the city. And I think we could save all kinds of money on snow removal and street repair. It'd be wonderful. Well, we've burned through our first a bit of time here, so thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Probably we'll do another one.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
So join us again next week.
Yeah.
Take care.
Have a good week out there. Bye now.